Hey guys, it's me, Marc Boucher-Colbert, and guess you're in the garden with NBC. You're in the garden with me, and that's the garden. And so here we are, yet again in the garden with NBC. Um, I'm out here at the school garden, Franciscan Montessori Earth School, part of the gardens that I take care of out here. This is particularly a garden that's devoted to our middle school program. We run a farmer's market every week, which is awesome, and come out to the fields and harvest what's in season. So today I want to bring up a topic that maybe a lot of gardeners haven't thought about, but it's really kind of on the leading edge. It's, as so many leading edge things are, it's ancient yet at the same time leading edge, and that's no-till gardening. The idea that we have a deeply ingrained rhythm in us as gardeners. It's like spring comes and we're just rearing to go. We just want to bust out the shovel, bust out the rototiller, and just start churning into that earth. There's definitely a satisfaction there. There's a pleasure there to be had. And yet, the more and more we learn about soil science, the more and more we learn about natural systems, the more and more we learn about just how plants grow and their partners, the partnerships that are developed in nature between plants and soil microorganisms. We learn that this may not be a great idea. Disturbing the soil, it may not be the best way to go about things. It's certainly creating more work for us as gardeners in one way. And so, why work against nature? Why not work with nature? That's the whole point of gardening, right? We're trying to ally ourselves with nature and natural systems to the degree we can and benefit from the intense and immense wisdom that's already out there. The stuff's come over billions of years. We don't have to reinvent it. And it's often better if we just set things up and step out of the way and just let it do its thing. So as gardeners, we can do that. No-till gardening has a lot of proponents. I'm going to recommend this book to you, Grow Your Soil by Diane Meisler. It's based on a lot of the pioneering research of Dr. Elaine Ingham, who's a soil microbiologist here in Oregon. And she's revealed just how complicated these networks are, how extraordinary they are. And learning more about that shifts our perspective on gardening. So rototilling, shoveling, anything that really disturbs the layers of the soil, anything that really is turning the soil topsy-turvy, is going to be breaking up some of these delicate communities. And these organisms, these communities of organisms in the soil, are basically serving us and will make gardening so much easier and so much more productive if we allow them to serve us and not destroy them in the process. Tilling has some other deleterious, other negative effects also. When we till, especially with a rototiller, the tines, the blades can only get so far down. And often what forms just below the reach of the blades is an actual zone of compaction called the hard pan. So we may be working at cross purposes, even though we see that loose, fluffy soil that we love to see and run our fingers through at the top, just below where the blades can reach. And of course, tillers can only go so deep, right? I mean, you're not tilling 10 feet down into the earth. You're tilling some number of inches down into the earth. Right below that can form a zone of compaction where basically the weight of the tiller sits and can't stir that part up, and can form a hard pan, which then is very difficult for roots to penetrate through. So there's a lot of reasons to go no-till, both for the sake of the microbial communities and for the actual mechanics of plant growth and the spread of roots through soil. So let's think about what no-till would look like. I think for a lot of gardeners, it's hard to imagine, how do I get that nice fluffy bed that I'm going to level out with a rake and have a beautiful planting surface to sprinkle in my carrots, my whatever it is, my small seeded crops maybe. How am I going to fight weeds if I'm not tilling? How does this work? Well, there's a lot of strategies. Again, I recommend this book to you. Some of our traditional gardening strategies like cover cropping are definitely in there. They form a part of the no-till strategy. I'm going to show you two interesting things that I use in my own gardening practice, and that's covering the earth, especially over the winter, with some kind of impermeable material. And I'll recommend a few in a minute when we go out to the field and look at that. And then just peeling that back and planting immediately into that beautiful brown soil where all the weeds, whatever was there in the fall, has now died and been digested by the soil microbes and macroorganisms too, the beetles, the various pill bugs and sow bugs, whatever's in the soil has eaten all that stuff that's been deprived of light basically all winter. So that's one strategy: cover, let sit for a while, and remove. And then another powerful strategy that I love is flaming. And flaming, as I'll say in a minute, is inherently dangerous. There's a lot of cautions you need to have in place, but it's a great strategy for basically lightly cooking whatever weeds start to emerge from the soil, thereby giving you a very clean surface and not bringing up additional weed seeds. Did I mention that when you till? By stirring the earth, you're stirring up this gigantic bank of weed seeds from every weed that's ever grown and spread its seed there. Many weed seeds can last for decades. Some I think up to 80 years. So there's basically, in every garden, there's a giant amount of weed seeds. And they get a light signal when they get close to the surface that tells them, now you little teeny little seed, you are close enough to the surface to actually have a shot. So let's get growing. So they get the same message that we're trying to give in this gardening program, except they're running counter to our desires, obviously. They're totally and truly faithful to their own natures, though. So they feel the sun, they're like, let's get growing, and boom, they're up and competing with your crops. So the less we till, the more we keep that soil surface undisturbed, such as with techniques like flaming and covering, basically some no-till techniques, the more success we're going to have, the less competitors we're going to have, the more bacteria, the more fungi we're going to have working on our team. So let's go out in the field and have a look, shall we? All right, so here I am in part of our garden, and I've got a piece of fabric down here. Again, I want to mention that you can use anything that will block light, but if you use just straight off the shelf black plastic from a hardware store, that is not treated for ultraviolet rays and will blast into a million smithereens probably by the end of the season. You'll never clean it up, and you're just adding to the plastic burden of the planet. I much prefer, like I said, this is a water quality liner for a tank. It's very durable. It's even got like some threads sewn in. There's some kind of fabric that is coated on both sides. I also really like the EPDM or pond liner. That stuff is a rubber material. It will take full sun for 20 years, and then it can be fully recycled. So those are fabrics that or surface or materials that I recommend to you. Stay away if you can from the straight off the shelf plastic stuff, the Visqueen at a hardware or a big box store. So when I pull this back, look at what we got. We got beautiful brown earth. Now you can see the winter growth right next to it, the grasses and such. So this to me is ready to till. Now I do see a few small weeds coming up here. A couple of things have been germinating with this warmer area that's been provided by the material. So my next step is going to be to take a flamer, and I'm just going to go get that flamer, and I'm going to show you how that works in a second here too. Okay guys, here we go. Here's the setup. I'm using a heavier duty flamer. I have a propane tank here that I've got mounted on a wheel truck just for convenience. I use walking up and down long rows. There's backpacks you can attach it to, or backpack frames. I've also just held it. There's smaller size versions that use just like a Coleman butane or propane stove tank. So there's lots of different sizes. A flamer is inherently dangerous, so it's up to you to be kind of using your wits, making sure you're not burning things, making sure you're not burning yourself. I tend to do most of my flaming in the spring when the soil is wet. In the summer, it's a definite fire hazard. And I generally only flame after I've irrigated and let things dry out just a little bit. I am not flaming beds with dry material when they are completely dry, because I know this stuff is going to catch on fire. So that's just a caveat. You have to be careful with this, especially in our age of increased fires. I live in the West in Oregon, and we have fires every summer, and it's with a drying climate, it's becoming more and more important that we really think this through and be cautious. So like I said, again, I'm doing most of my flaming when the weeds are emerging in the spring. I'll also do it in the summer, but I'm always making sure I'm irrigating, and I always want to have some measure of you can't compete with the motorcycles, even with a flamer. I always want to make sure I have some measure of protection ready to go, some water already, a hose that's live in case I need to put something out. That's just a common sense thing. All right, I'm going to open up my tank. I've got a control valve here. In a second, there's going to be, oh, now this, I got a bad light here, so I got to knock it around. There's a big flame that's going to come flying out of here in a second. There we go. four times the charm. And basically what I'm going to do with this is I'm just going to point it down to the soil, and I'm going to sweep over the soil. I just turned it off. Basically, a lot of steam is going to come up. Any green plants that have just sprouted will basically get cooked and wilt and just fall over. You don't have to flame them anymore. That's enough. So you're basically making just quick passes over the surface of the soil, and everything gets knocked down. The next day, it'll be dead. You won't see it there. If plants are a little more established, you may have to spend a little more time to get them bright green and get them to that wilt point. But essentially, this is going to be a powerful tool for you. Again, a dangerous tool, one you need to be cautious with, but it's going to be a powerful tool if you want to go in that direction of no-till, because it allows you to eliminate weeds on the surface without making any disruption in the soil underneath there and not bringing any more weed seeds to the top. So I'm going to wish you luck in your no-till ventures. I've found it helpful and beneficial in my garden, and I'm trying to do as little as possible. I'm using techniques like covering. Of course, I'm using standard things like cover cropping, and I'm using things like flaming to minimize the amount of disturbance that I need to do for the soil and maximize the benefit that the organisms that live there can do for me. So good gardening. We'll see you again in the garden with MBC.